Hi there. If you're a CFO or a financial leader, you probably already understand how important a financial budget and forecast is. Or if you're a business owner, it probably creates a lot less anxiety for you to understand your numbers and to have some type of sneak peek into the future. However, there's the right way to build a budget and forecast and the wrong way. And that's why today I'm going to be talking about the common mistakes in the business budgeting process. My name is Steve Coffrin. I'm the founder of Boosting Your Financial IQ. And over my career, I have built a ton of financial budgets. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours in Excel. I've worked with management teams across industries, across business sizes, and it doesn't matter if you're doing $1 million a year or $1 billion a year. This video is really critical, and the budgeting process is so important to get right. Now, here's a little nuance with the naming convention. The word budget is commonplace in business, so I'm not going to try to change that word. However, I prefer the word forecast instead to describe what we're talking about today. But I'm going to go back and forth. I'll say budget, I'll say forecast. I'm going to use them synonymously. But here's the difference. The budget has this old process, this old mentality. The forecast is like the new way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to be explaining these differences in the video. So let's get started. Okay, so the number one common mistake out there is to mistakenly believe that the budget is somehow the strategy of the company. So this is how it typically goes down in an organization. If you're a bigger organization, usually in July or August, you're starting the planning process. So you start building this top-down budget. You're working with business unit leaders, and maybe they're creating a bottom-up budget. But ultimately, you're coming together and you're working for months to try to forecast the next year. A lot of times, companies just roll forward the numbers. They say, okay, here are our expenses. This was 32% of sales last year. Let's just forecast the same thing. And they just roll forward a budget instead of taking a zero-based approach, okay, which is a mistake. Creating a zero-based budget, saying, hey, look, let's blow up the whole company. Let's imagine we're starting from scratch. Building the cost structure from there is a really important exercise, but it takes a lot of time. So they just roll forward these budgets. There's politicking, there's all these games that are occurring behind the scenes. Finally, hopefully the budget is done sometime in December or January or February, and then it rolls out for the calendar year, and that's the fixed budget. And then business leaders and financial leaders, they're holding each other accountable to these variances that are being measured based on the budget that was created. Now, the problem is when this budget rolls out, it usually corresponds with the strategic plan. So business leaders and financial leaders, they think that the budget is their strategy. They say, okay, next year we want to grow by 20% and we want to boost profitability by 30%. And here's this budget that's going to be the roadmap to get there. Well, a budget is not a strategy, number one. So make sure you distinguish between the two and don't make them the same thing. Number two, I alluded to this, is that the budget has to be rolling. It can't be over a fixed calendar year and then you roll out another one the next year. For me, it's like get rid of the whole entire budgeting process. It disappears because you do it one time and you build it for 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months out into the future. Every time a month is finished, another month gets added on and it becomes this rolling process. So never again do you have to go through the politicking, the games, the thousands of hours or hundreds of hours, whatever you spend on creating this annual budget. The annual budget goes away. It becomes rolling. Number three, complexity is a huge issue when it comes to the budgeting process. I've seen some dirty, nasty, ugly Excel budgets where there's just line items and worksheets and other worksheets that tie to this worksheet and tie to that worksheet. And it becomes so complex, nobody can follow it. I would say start from a higher level. And this goes into looking at your GL in your chart of accounts and making sure you don't have too many chart of accounts. I remember I became the CFO of this company and I looked at the chart of accounts and there were thousands of accounts that they were using to track different expenses. And some of the expenses were so immaterial. I mean, we were $1 billion company and we were tracking expenses and had separate chart of accounts for $1,000 in annual spend. So I eliminated a lot of the accounts. I consolidated and I said, look, if we ever need to do research on some of these accounts, we could dive into the numbers, but we're going to be more forward focused and we're going to be looking at big material opportunities to improve the business. We're not going to be tracking the immaterial stuff that just wastes a lot of time. Complexity can kill the budgeting forecasting process, so make sure you keep it as simple as possible. Okay, the few value drivers of the business are very simple. It's labor. Labor is a huge value driver. Pricing, material costs. If you are in the business of selling materials, there's a little bit of upside there, but there's only so much wiggle room with suppliers. But it really comes down to your operating model, your cost structure, your efficiencies. So you want to be focusing on the line items that are really going to drive value. You don't want to become so focused and act like a cop, okay? Because nobody's going to like the FinOps cop that goes around trying to hold people to a certain budget. So remember, I talked about the old way of budgeting and the new way of forecasting. Let me explain a little bit more of my methodology and my ideology here, because this is really critical. So the first thing is that the budget, and I'm going to compare and contrast the two. So budget is the old way when I use that word in this section. Forecasting is the new way of looking at it. Budgeting, that budget process, is all about predicting and controlling. Okay, you're trying to predict the future. You may be pulling industry reports or looking at reports from consultants or whatever it is. Nobody can predict the future. So just because this trend line is looking like that, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen that way. So trying to predict the future, it could be a fun exercise, and it's good to have some type of prediction built into your model, but the budget is less about trying to predict how the calendar year is going to roll out, and it's going to be more about hypothesizing how things are going to happen month over month and correcting that along the way. So budgets, prediction, and it's control. It's like this command and control thing. It's like this I gotcha type exercise. I'm going to lock you into these numbers. I'm going to have you commit to these numbers, and then I'm going to control you by measuring variances every month. Okay, that does not work. It does not work. Trust me. It creates a lot of games. Forecasting instead is about informing the decision makers. So you're still making predictions, don't get me wrong, but you're hypothesizing into the future, and you're trying to inform decision makers instead of trying to catch them in a snare. When you have a budget and you're measuring variances and you're holding people accountable to those variances, guess what's going to happen with the budgeting process? When you go to set a budget, if you're a business unit leader, you're going to sandbag, right? If they ask you how much revenue you're going to do, you're going to use a lower number. You're going to go probably higher on your costs. You're going to build in this margin into your budget. Now, imagine if you're a business unit leader and that goes up to the next level, a divisional leader. Well, the business unit leader is going to add padding, the divisional leader is going to add padding, and then by the time it reaches the very top, it's this budget that's based on all this fluff, or it's sandbagged across all the different layers. And how's that going to help you to make better decisions? It's not. And that's why so many budgets are off, they don't even match reality, and there's such a waste of time. So instead, create a forecast that's rolling, hypothesize the best that you can, and use it as a tool to inform and empower leaders to act. The next thing is a budget is often tied to compensation. And that's when the variances come in. It's like, okay, if you do this, then we will give you that. It's a tit for tat relationship, and that's never a good idea. So try not to tie compensation directly to the budget, or once again, you're going to get all different types of games that is going to be counterproductive to the overall process. So when you make the budget like a performance contract, where you hold people accountable to their numbers, to their costs, they do all sorts of wacky things that hurt the business. So they're going to sandbag their revenue. They may withhold some revenue or delay revenue so they could push it into the next quarter. And there's just all these games that don't add value to the business. Also think about the customer experience. They go in there and they cut costs to hit their numbers, and now all of a sudden your products and services go to crap and the customer experience goes down the toilet, and next thing you know, your profits in the future are really going to suffer. So contrast that with the forecast. There may be pieces that are tied to compensation, but there are more KPIs than just the budget that relate to compensation. There are qualitative and quantitative factors related to the overall business and overall performance and long-term health of the business. And that's how compensation should be based, not based on variances. Okay, we talked about timing. The budgeting process is an annual process. Scratch that. Don't ever do that again. Okay, this is the last year you'll do it. Build a rolling forecast. Make sure it's 12 months, 18 months, 36 months rolling, whatever you feel comfortable with. And remember, 36 months out into the future is going to be totally inaccurate. The point is not trying to have this accuracy 36 months out in advance, but it's having this long-term view, and you're just constantly updating it as you make hypotheses, go out there and execute, and then you get the data. So it's like build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn. Next thing with budgets, if they are ever updated, they're updated at the end of the month. So you have a financial review meeting, you update the budget in that meeting, but usually that's 3 to 4 weeks after the month has ended and when the books have closed. And by that time, it's almost too late. You're trying to update the budget for the current month and 3 to 4 weeks have already passed by. In the forecasting process, you can make updates at any time. In mid-month, it could be the first week of the month, but anytime you have new pieces of information, oh, we're gonna hire this new employee, we're gonna take on these additional marketing costs, whatever it may be, as soon as that information becomes available, the budget gets updated immediately. No longer do you have to wait until the month is over. Here's a big distinction. Budgets are prepared for the top leadership. Forecasts are built for the people that are in the trenches, on the front line, making the day-to-day decisions. And that's a big distinction. Budgets is for this command and control exercise at the top. Forecasts are built for people that can use the numbers and go make decisions to drive greater value right now, today. Next, controls in a budget environment are based on variances. So we talked about that. You're measuring variances. You say, hey, we're gonna do $10 million this month. You end up doing 12 million, okay, you have a $2 million variance and you're rewarded or you're punished based on those variances. With forecasts, controls are based on KPIs or key performance indicators, maintaining this rolling forecast, and then relative performance improvement. Because look, let's just say you hit a hard time in your business. You create a budget, right, and you're measuring variances. Let's just say the economy just takes a nosedive. Maybe your variances are huge, so that business unit leader gets punished and then their morale gets all damaged because they're being punished and they go into the budget meeting depressed every time because they're stuck because they're being measured on this annual budget contract that was made up months ago when reality was completely different. With a forecast, you're updating regularly, so you're measuring relative performance. So maybe the business is down, but it could be down a lot more if the business unit leader wasn't pursuing strategies which was improving the business. So it's relative improvement. Once again, you could have a budget, and let's just say you set a revenue target of 10 million. Let's just say the business unit leader and his team or her team, they're working really hard and they crush it and they earn 12 million. Well, you say, great, 2 million variance, you guys are doing a great job. That may be terrible. It should have been maybe 15 or 20 million. Measuring relative performance is really, really critical, and it's a distinct difference between the budget and the forecast. So there you have it. Those are the differences and distinctions between a budget and a forecast. Like I said, I've worked with so many companies to help them grow and to turn them around. I've been the CFO of organizations, and I know what has worked and what hasn't worked because I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I've also seen a lot of teams struggle, and then I've seen teams that have really succeeded by having the right process in place. And by following these things that I outlined today, you can really improve your forecasting process. Make sure it's rolling, make sure it's simple, make sure you're measuring relative performance, you're not using it as a command and control exercise, and make sure it's not your strategy, okay? There's a lot more to strategy than just the budget. So I hope that helped you avoid some of the common mistakes in the budgeting process. I hope you create this rolling process and you never have to do the annual exercise again because it's terrible. I've been there and it's just, that's why I have no hair because I pulled it all out in this process. No, I'm just kidding. But if you got value out of this video, it would mean the world to me if you hit the like button, leave your comments below. What works for you? What have you seen that works in the budgeting process? Are there other topics you want me to dive into as it relates to building your financial acumen? If you are already a member of the Boosting Your Financial IQ community, thanks for joining. I love your support. I'm glad you're jumping into these videos and you're following me along the way. That's great. If you're not a member, you could go to byfiq.com and you can join for free and get access to a lot of great resources. Finally, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do that now so you're notified every time I drop a new video just like this. In the meantime, keep on boosting your financial IQ, and I hope you take care of yourself.